All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to not election coverage from the United States. I don't know what we're going to talk about tonight entirely, but we are not really going to talk about that very much. Although we'll just offer this. It's as I heard on the radio this morning, I was driving into work, and somebody made the comment, it's a little bit like driving by a car accident. You just have to look, even though you know it's not going to be very pretty. You still just have to look over there and see what's happening. Anyway, as a number of good Lutheran scholars were saying on social media the last couple days, scholars out of the U.S., that doesn't matter really who's in the White House, or for our case, who's the Prime Minister. God's in control and God's in charge, and that's as far as we'll go on religion and politics this evening. At any rate, welcome to those who are here, and I can tell you already we've overcome one major technical glitch to be online and having Bible class in here this evening, and the technical glitch is me. I managed to turn on my microphone, which was causing us all a little bit of head scratching. But anyway, we're up and running. So we're in the sixth session. I'll just sort of give you a little roadmap of where we are in the overall process of studying the book of Job. By my accounting, we're probably going to have a couple more sessions yet where we look at Job. We're coming to the end of the book. The next major thing after tonight is when God actually begins speaking to Job, and God reveals a lot in those speeches. And it's probably going to take us one session and then another one to kind of wrap up everything that God has to say at the end of the book. And then after that, or the last Wednesday in November, we're going to take a little bit of a recess for 1 week, and then we'll start a new Bible class. The first week in September, it'll just be a short little 3-week Bible class on some topic to do with Advent and Christmas. No idea what that topic will be yet. If there's something Advent-y and Christmassy you'd like to think about together, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll take it into consideration and see how the Lord leads us. But anyway, we are here tonight on the 4th of November, or whenever it is people are having to tune this in and watch it at home, and we're happy for everybody that's here. A little bit of an update just on where the world is at these days. We're in November now. That would be November 2020 right there. Yeah, just coming at us like a flaming wreck here. We'll see what happens. But anyway, I thought that was kind of a pretty good analysis of the world so far. If we do end up back in quarantine again, and we don't really want that, or lockdown, fortunately here, I think in the region of Waterloo, we're green, which is as good as you can get, we'll take that. But if we do end up being locked down, you might want to learn a new language. Especially since Christmas is coming and all those Mandarin oranges are going to be out there, and you can practice your Mandarin by spelling all sorts of. That's really bad. I'm really sorry, but anyway. This is a little more sick, but this is the sort of thing I find funny that other people just go, ooh, but here it is. Yeah, the oohing and the awing is going on here in the church. Yes, for those at home going, ooh. Well, you get your dog back. I mean, he's yours, back there he goes again, and you won't have any more vet bills the other way around, he's done that now, he's passed on from that, so anyway, just, interesting combination of careers, And then since we just celebrated the Reformation, and I've used this one before, but I saw it the other day again on social media somewhere. Oops, there we go. Luther just nailing his 95 Theses on the door and fixing the theology of the place. So, and that's an ongoing task in the church. We're always being reformed, if you will, to the mind of Christ. All right, just a quick note on a couple of things that are, if you haven't picked up your handout yet and you're at home, that's available at the church website. Here in the church, there are hard copies available for you. And if you have any questions along the way, we will take some pauses to consider questions, both from those gathered here in the church tonight and any that come in. And if anything really startling happens in the U.S. election that we absolutely need to know and somebody wants to shoot that over to us too, we can at least be up to date when we go home or something like that anyway. All right. We're going to look at tonight, this is probably the one session that I've sort of struggled with the most as to how to present this material, because this is a part where maybe some of the practical applications are just going to be a little bit harder to see, but we're going to try and draw them out for you this evening. What we're going to primarily focus on tonight is a series of 5 chapters where Job kind of sums everything up again. We've looked, just to sort of recap the journey here over the last little while. Job has, of course, gone from the heights all the way down to the depths. His 3 friends have come. They've sat in silence. They've watched. And then they have engaged in this series of dialogues back and forth where these 3 friends have administered their own peculiar brand of comfort, which isn't all that comforting. And Job has remained constant in his confession. And as we saw last week and a little bit the week before, in his own way has become a prophet, if you will, of the Messiah. And his own life, even though he is unaware of this probably completely at this point in time, is actually a foreshadowing of the life of Jesus. And so all of this is going on. Job may understand some of it on the surface. But now the dialogue has ended. Everybody has had their say. And the time has come for Job to summarize things. And if you've ever been in a hard time in your lifetime when, just things are really overwhelming, very emotional time, maybe the time of a death or an illness or other great upset in your life, you know that at certain times you can be right up there on the heights. God's going to get us through this. God is there, and I'm feeling strong even though everything is going wrong. And the first 2 chapters of Job's kind of final defense sort of bring that flavor to things. He's right, there's a certain strength there that you can just see in the way he presents what he has to say and what he's about. But then in the final 3 chapters, he kind of descends again a little bit into the depths. Now, if we had gone through all of the speeches of Job and his friends line by line, chapter by chapter, we'd have seen that ebb and flow along the way. There's times when Job is very confident, very full of faith, and there's other times where you can tell that this is all just very overpowering. And one of the neat things about the book of Job, particularly this little section, as well as places like the book of Psalms, is that we get to see the whole spectrum of human emotion laid out for us. All the same things we still feel today. And we might use different words, different ways of expressing it, but the emotion is still there. That sense sometimes, as I said before, of being right up on the heights and then just a few minutes later being right down in the pit. So let's start off on the heights. And both of these sections, too, I should say, and this is just in the first paragraph of the lesson handout, both of these sections are kind of like you would have in the theater, particularly in plays by someone like Shakespeare, where after a kind of critical development in the play happens, the main character kind of speaks what we learned in English class as a soliloquy, where they just kind of speak to the audience or speak to themselves, and we get to overhear what they have to say, kind of like Hamlet, as he's pondering his future, and he goes through that great to be or not to be soliloquy. It's not a dialogue with anybody else. There's nobody else on stage usually when he's saying that. It's set into the audience. It's his inner thinking. And that's what we have here. There's no back and forth anymore, and this is just Job laying out his heart for us. All right. From the heights. Where is Job at here? We're going to read little bits of this. If you have a Bible handy, that would be good. Some of this is a little too much to actually put on the screen, so I chose not to do that. But we have a little outline here of what Job is going to say. I'm just going to read to you from the beginning of Job chapter 27. As God lives, he says, who has taken away my right? And the Almighty, who has made my soul bitter? As long as my breath is in me, and the Spirit of God is in my nostrils, my lips will not speak falsehood, and my tongue will not utter deceit. Far be it from me to say that you are right till I die. I will not put away my integrity from me. I hold fast to my righteousness. I will not let it go. My heart does not reproach me for any of my days. Job begins this very, 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 in a very strong voice. He's actually using in his words here a couple of phrases that would have been recognized immediately by his hearers as phrases that you speak when you're making a vow, when you're taking an oath. As God lives, that's one of the phrases that is a vow statement, where people are essentially calling God as their witness and saying, as God lives, this is the state with me. And another of the vow kind of statements, far be it from me. I will never, ever, ever do whatever it is that is being accused of me, or what I'm tempted to do, or what I might do in this situation. And what he's saying here is that he is not going to deny his righteousness, that righteousness that he has been clinging to, that he has done nothing. Job never ever says he's not sinful. But in the context of the dialogue that he's been having, he has kept himself from, shameful outward sin. He's not a reprobate, a criminal, or anything like that. He's lived an outwardly upright, moral life, and that's the righteousness he's claiming. And as God lives, he says, I'm not going to give in to you guys. And, this has been what the three friends have been at all the way through as well. Job, you're a sinner, and really you just got to come clean with us, come clean with God, and then things will start getting put back together. And Job's going, no, I'm not going to plead guilty to something I'm not guilty of. Kind of like in the cop shows, where they've got the innocent person in the room, and they're hammering away at that person to try to get that person to confess that they did the wrong thing. And the person, no, I did not do this. I did not do this. I maintain my innocence. I'm right. And so that's how he begins. And then things take an interesting turn, a turn that certainly shows the strength of Job, but a turn that we might be a little bit uncomfortable with because of the things that Job begins to say. He begins a prayer at verse 7. Let my enemy be as the wicked. Let him who rises up against me be as the unrighteous. For what is the hope of the godless when God cuts them off, when God takes away his life? Will God hear his cry when distress comes upon him? Will he take delight in the Almighty? Will he call upon the Lord at all times? And then he goes on a little bit later, and this gets a little more squeamish, if you will. He talks about the wicked person. He says, "This is the portion of the wicked man with God, and the heritage the oppressor has. If his children are multiplied, it's for the sword. If his descendants have not got enough, and his descendants have not got enough bread, those who survive him, the pestilence buries, and his widows do not weep. Though he heap up silver like dust and pile up clothing like clay, he may pile it up, but the righteous will wear it." He goes into this prayer that's very much like some of the Psalms. If you've ever read around in the book of Psalms, there's a whole bunch of really comforting Psalms, like Psalm 23, Psalm 46, Psalm 121, where everything is all peaceful and we're calling on God to come and comfort us. And then you read on a couple more Psalms, and you find these Psalms where it's calling out on God to smash the enemy absolutely, utterly, completely. And some of them are very graphic in terms of what they call on God to do. And you read these things, and you're going, "Oh my goodness, how could this be in the same Bible as the Lord is my shepherd? Is this the same? How does this all come together?" Well, that is on one level. Another example of God letting people and using people even in the height and the depth of their emotions. Letting that all hang out. That's okay. Say it. And we are maybe a little too polite sometimes in when we're going through tough times to say these things out loud. But certainly, when we're in a tough time or when somebody's against us, it's not above us to, at least secretly, wish something very awful to happen to somebody, sort of like when somebody cuts you off in traffic, and something comes out of your mouth that, probably shouldn't even be in your head in the first place, let alone blurting out your mouth that you wish upon this person because they've just cut you off in traffic. Now, that's a fairly trivial kind of a thing. But here, Job is seeing these guys, these friends, who have come to help him more as enemies. And what he's really calling on God to do here is to judge them as well as to judge him. And the realization that these are this is really a cry not just against the individuals who are in the target of the person who's crying out to God, but this is really just a cry out against all of the evil in the world, and that's what Job is doing here. Let these guys be like the wicked. I mean, they're not being friendly to me. I'm angry at them, and he just kind of spills it all out to God, and lets it all hang out. And as I say, there's a kind of a comfort in that, God's big enough to hear that sort of thing. And sometimes there is, benefit in just it all out to God, and putting it into God's hands. And Job here is nowhere planning revenge himself. That's the key thing. And that's the thing that's not given us to do. We're not the ones who are to take vengeance into our own hands and then start, meting out our kind of justice. That's not what Job is planning here. But he's commending his friends here, or asking God to kind of intervene on his behalf with his friends. All right, that's the first chapter. Any comments, questions, observations? We're not going to dig word by word by word through everything that's said here, or we'll be here till, the U.S. election will be decided, and we won't get home to see it. All right, I checked the email. There were none, so if any do come in, we'll check again in a few moments. All right, from here, from this, then Job moves into a very, I don't want to say, a kind of almost moving speech. And we're not exactly sure, and all of the Bible translations we use today say that chapter 28 comes from Job, and that's probably the best guess. But it might be, just might be, that the actual author of chapter 28 is the person who wrote the book of Job, and is that person's little interlude before Job winds things up. It's not a really big point, but it is a possibility. Like I say, in all our Bibles today, it just goes on with saying, Job talks about wisdom, which is what he's going to talk about here. And this is just kind of a neat chapter. For all the stuff about that we struggle with to understand, this is just a kind of a wonderful little interlude and thinking about wisdom. And this chapter we will read pretty much in its entirety, because it's just a very beautiful chapter, and tells us a little bit about life back in Job's time too. Let's read from chapter 28. The question, the first little part of this is going to highlight that wisdom isn't something you discover like gold or jewels in a mine. Surely there is a mine for silver, he says, a place for gold that they refine. Iron is taken out of the earth, and copper is smelted from the ore. Man puts an end to darkness and searches out the farthest limit, the ore in gloom and deep darkness. He opens shafts in a valley away from where anyone lives. They are forgotten by travelers. They hang in the air, far from mankind. They swing to and fro. As for the earth, out of it comes bread, but underneath it is turned up as by fire. Its stones are places of sapphires, and it has dust of gold. The path no bird of prey knows, and the falcon's eye has not seen it. The proud beasts have not trodden it. Man puts his hand on the flinty rock and overturns mountains by the roots. He cuts out channels in the rocks, and his eyes see every precious thing. He dams up the streams so that they do not trickle, and the thing that is hidden he brings to light. But where shall wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? This is kind of an interesting insight into life 4,000 years ago. We think about these people and we go, what was life really like for them? Job here, or the author, whoever it is that actually is saying this, gives us a kind of an interesting insight, into the technological side of life. They were mining back then. Mining all kinds of things out of the hills, and things like ore that they could smelt and use to make stuff. They were mining for gems. Tells us a little bit even about how they do the mining. Cracking open the dark places. I read somewhere, and I just can't off the top of my head, I read this yesterday, and the mechanics of it all are a little iffy in my mind, but it involved boiling water to open rocks up. I don't know whether that makes any sense to anybody or not, but they had ways of using the hydraulics of water to open things up. And then how they did some of their mining, it says here, they hang in the air. So you can imagine these miners, hanging on a swing off of the side of a hill and chipping away and clunking away to get out what they needed to get out. And that none of this happened right next to town. It was all out in the wilderness areas, and there they are. And in a sense, too, that out of the earth comes bread, but that something under the earth is very warm. That the further down you go, it doesn't get cooler down there. It gets hotter, which we know today because of how the earth is constructed. But they had insight into this, and the different gems that they mine, and how people, he says, overturning mountains by their roots. I don't think they were talking here about the Rockies, but the hills that they had, that they, if they needed to move the hill, they got about moving the hill, and cutting channels in the rocks, damming up the streams, all these things, these amazing marvels that they were able to do for their time. But that's not where wisdom's found. Not something you mine out, not something you technologically achieve. Elroy.
It's interesting that quite often in reading you come across phrases like gems of wisdom or that kind of thing. I'm just wondering, it seems like we've attributed something like a gem quality to wisdom, knowledge, or...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Elroy, just for those who are at home and can't maybe hear what Elroy was just saying, he made the comment that, interestingly, we talk about, gems of wisdom and things like that, and yeah, that comparison and that use of that phrase, that, wisdom is a gem. But Job would argue, not a gem that we go, we always discover on our own. It needs to be revealed to us. So, okay, you can't go mine it out of the rocks, wisdom, and you can't also buy it. That's the focus of the next 10 verses, where he talks about the great price that wisdom has. Where will wisdom be found? Where is the place of understanding? Man doesn't even know its worth, and it is not found in the land of the living. The deep says, it's not in me. The sea says, it's not in me. It cannot be bought for gold, and silver cannot be weighed as its price. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir or any precious onyx or sapphire. Gold and glass cannot equal it, nor can it be exchanged for jewels and fine gold. No mention of it shall be made of coral or crystal. The price of wisdom is above pearls. The topaz of Ethiopia cannot equal it, nor can it be valued in pure gold. From where does wisdom come? And where is the place of understanding? It's hidden from the eyes of all the living, concealed from the birds of the air. Abaddon and death. Abaddon is just basically the same word as Hades or Sheol, just another word to refer to the place of the dead. We have no rumor of it. We've heard no rumor of it with our ears. It's not there either. So it's not something you can buy. It's not something you can conjure up out of nothing. And but he says, but God understands the way, and he knows its place. For he looks to the ends of the earth, and he sees everything under the heavens. When he gave to the wind its weight, and apportioned the waters by measure, when he made a decree for the rain, and the way for the lightning of thunder, and then he saw and declared it, he established it and searched it out, and he said to man, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to turn away from evil is understanding. I just love how that kind of goes through all of the stuff that humans can do, their highest technology, their greatest riches. You're not going to find wisdom with either of those things. But where you find wisdom, the fear of the Lord, that's wisdom.
And that's not the only place. I'm thinking of another quotation, but I'm not remembering.
Oh, yeah, that's on the next slide. Yes, sirree. Elroy was just commenting for those at home. This is somewhere else in the Bible, too, isn't it? Absolutely. Yes, it is. And wisdom, the interesting thing here is the whole place of wisdom as a thing in the Old Testament is very, very, very important. And even into the New Testament. Wisdom isn't just stuff you know. Wisdom isn't just, being wise and knowing how to solve big problems. Wisdom actually takes on flesh and blood, as we'll see here in just a half a minute. Proverbs 1, chapter 7, this is the one you probably had in mind. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, or most translations use wisdom. I don't know why I didn't grab one that at least used the right word that we're talking about here. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. And by fear here too. Fear is, in the Old Testament particularly, not just a being scared. This isn't talking about being scared of the Lord. This is a reverence for the Lord. This is a respect for the Lord. One could even go so far as to say it entails faith, too, that trust in the Lord and that holding the Lord as for who He is the beginning of wisdom. It starts with God, and it's echoed much later in the Old Testament by Solomon in the book of Ecclesiastes. Or he doesn't actually use the word wisdom here, but if you've ever read the book of Ecclesiastes, you know that it is really also about finding God's wisdom in the things that come and go in this world. And at the end of the book, the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God, keep His commandments. This is the whole duty of man. There's wisdom right there. If you do these, fear God, keep His commands, that's wisdom. Now, as I said, in the Old Testament, wisdom is never just a thing that you acquire or a bunch of knowledge that you hold in your head. Wisdom is actually something much, much more than that. And if you go into the book of Proverbs, particularly in chapter 8, also in 9, and in that area, you will find that wisdom actually takes on a kind of a human form, and actually points us to Jesus Himself. Let me just share with you some verses here from chapter 8. This is a little longer section, and so I didn't want to print the whole thing out. But just think about, just listen to this and think on what's being said here. This is from Proverbs chapter 8, and it's wisdom is speaking here. Someone called wisdom. Does not wisdom call out? Does not understanding raise her voice? And here's some of the things she says. The Lord brought me forth as the first of His works. Before His deeds of old, I was appointed from eternity, from the beginning, before the world began. When there were no oceans, I was given birth. When there were no springs abounding with water, before the mountains were settled in place, before the hills, I was given birth. Before He made the earth or its fields or any of the dust of the world, I was there when He set the heavens in its place, when He marked out the horizons in the face of the deep, when He established the clouds above and fixed securely the fountains of the deep. I was there as the craftsman at His side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing in His presence, rejoicing in His whole world, and delighting in mankind. Blessed is the one who listens to me. Whoever finds me finds life, and receives favor from the Lord. Does it remind you of anybody else in the Bible? There from the very beginning, while creation is happening, delighting in everything that God has done. Pardon me? The Word, yeah. There's very similar language in Proverbs chapter 8 to what John will use in the beginning of his gospel when he says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And so wisdom in this context is really seen as a messianic. This is the Messiah. This is the second person of the Trinity, so to speak. This is wisdom here, and then that gets into the New Testament. Paul particularly really drives the point home. If it wasn't kind of obvious already, he removes all doubt. This is from the opening of 1 Corinthians in the opening chapter. Has God not made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. Jews demand signs, Greeks seek wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. Or as he says a little later in the letter to the Colossians, second chapter here, my goal is that they may be encouraged in heart, united in love, so that they may have the full riches of complete understanding, in order that they may know the mystery of God, namely Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. I tell you this so that no one may deceive you by fine-sounding arguments. Again, Job doesn't know this probably in all certainly not in all the detail that we know it. But here already, God is in his speech setting the stage for what is yet to come. That the real wisdom of God isn't, figuring out some great technological issue. It's not something you achieve through your work and your efforts and you go out and buy it and you say, okay, I got it. No, real wisdom begins with the fear of the Lord, that relationship of respect and trust and faith, and then it becomes real in Christ. It becomes real for us in Christ. It's not just something out there to kind of get your mind around, but something that actually lives in and with you and walks with you all along the way, so that even if the world does not consider you to be a particularly wise person, and few of us actually probably are considered all that wise in the eyes of the world, we still we're wise. Well, my neighbor might think I'm denser than a bag of hammers, but and sometimes he's right. But I have wisdom. It's not the wisdom of the world, but it's that wisdom that takes on flesh and lived and died for me, and that now lives in me. That's what makes us wise. There's where we find our wisdom and our strength. All right, we'll take just a half a second here. A couple of questions here. Oh, good. All right, so sounds like reading. Yes, comment here. Reading Job sounds like reading through Proverbs, or Solomon talks about good. You read my mind. Why is it that fools fail to follow God's plan? So even though God has a plan, fools follow evil and are given free choice by God to follow evil plans. If I had the answer to that, I'd write a book. That's the great conundrum, isn't it? Two people learning exactly the same thing, can be completely different on these things. I guess the theological answer would be to say that that's what sin does to us. It focuses us on ourselves. It turns us away from God, and the result of that is that we set aside God's wisdom. And we try to go it in our own kind of a way? Yeah, that's a heavy question, because that's the hard thing. Yeah, some very smart people can be fools in God's eyes because they refuse to believe or refuse to follow his way. Yeah. Sue, did I see your hand up, or were you just bidding in the auction for later?
Bidding in the auction.
She's bidding in the auction. Okay, go. Yeah, what's your question, Sue? Go ahead.
We're born in sin.
Yeah.
And unless we are taught, unless we are given the knowledge and accept it, that's why we're fools. Because without that knowledge, without learning the Bible, and learning about God and who he is and why he's there, yeah, people are going to be fools and follow evil.
Absolutely. Yeah, just for those who might not have been able to pick that up at home, Sue was just reminding us that we're all born in sin. And unless God intervenes somehow into our lives, that's where we would stay. Yeah, but he does. He brings us his wisdom. And ultimately in Christ, yeah, he wisdom takes on flesh and comes and lives among us and shares God's wisdom with us. The wisdom, that looks so foolish to the world. I mean, you stop and think about this for a few minutes. We have crosses in the church everywhere. When we have the hymnals out, if we are ever able to do that again, they got crosses all over them. There's crosses all over the building. People 2,000 years ago thought this was absolute madness to have crosses around. It would be in the same sense as you and me today, hanging an electric chair at the front of the church or a hangman's noose, because all the cross was a place where criminals died, the most shameful way of dying. And here these Christian people, they stick this cross up everywhere. Why? Not because they're total idiots, although the world, sometimes thinks that way about us, but because that's where God's ultimate wisdom was shown. There on the cross, taking our sin and giving us Christ's righteousness and covering us. That's God's ultimate wisdom for us. Okay, see if we churned up any more. Nope. We'll leave the phone for a moment. So this is the heights. This is as Job is. I heard something when I was watching the CBC last night, an expression I hadn't heard for a long time. We used it out on the prairies all the time. He's cooking with gas here. I mean, he's just cranking out good stuff, and we're happy for him. However, as we move into the next 3 chapters, and he gives his final, kind of summation of things, it's not quite so cheery a thing, and we'll go through what he has to say. First, there's a longing in chapter 29. I'm not going to read the entire chapter, but there's a kind of a pattern that Job uses through this chapter. Sometimes when we read these things in English, we miss, just because we don't write this way anymore, we miss some of the structure that's there. The whole thing begins with Job recounting his blessings that he had. I just pulled one line out of there. My path was drenched with cream. That speaks through the ages, Let me just read a little bit of it, and you get the sense of what he's longing for, the blessings of the old days. Oh, that I were in the months of old, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone on my head, and by his light I walked through the darkness. I was in my prime when the friendship of God was upon my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me, when my children were all around me, when my steps were washed with butter. That doesn't sound quite as cool, but anyway. And the rock poured out for me streams of oil. So he just, everything. Oh, I was using a different translation, that's right. Oh, this is the word, this translation uses butter instead of cream. Yeah, my path was drenched with cream, or you were wandering around in butter. I'll go for cream. I think that's a little... Oops. When I have cereal, which is not every day, I like cream. Not skim milk. Like, let's have some taste here. Let's go. And I remember one time when we were kids, we were city kids, so we didn't know much about the farm, but we stopped for a while. We started buying cream directly off of a farm outside of Edmonton. And we were just stunned at that cream, you could actually stick your spoon up in the stuff. It was that thick. And for a while, we actually ate that on our cereal. That explains a few things back in the pathology there of my life. All right. And then because he had these great blessings, he was an honored man. And he talks about that in verse 7. When I went out of the gates of the city, when I prepared my seat in the square, young men saw me and they stepped aside. The aged rose and stood. The princes refrained from talking and laid their hand on their mouth. He's this very honored man, and he came into the center of the town. People went, there's Mr. Job, and they got out of his way and let him do what he wanted to do. And then he talks about, this is the kind of the main argument he's making here. Sometimes when these other things are on either side, the key point is right in the middle here. I rescued the poor. I made the widow's heart sing, was eyes to the blind, a father to the needy, broke the fangs of the wicked. He's again remembering his former life and seeing that he was no perfect man. That's not what he's arguing here, but that he lived in a generous kind of a way with people. He did the things that he was supposed to do, and because of that, he assumed that he would he'd have more blessings. Verse 18 is where we're at here now in this chapter, 18. Then I thought, I shall die in my nest, or die in my own house, my days as numerous as the grains of sand. I'll die at 100 and whatever. I'll die in my own house. It'll all be just wonderful. And then he remembers again how he was honored in that time. Men listened to me and they waited, kept silence for my counsel. When I spoke, they did not speak again, and my word dropped upon them. They waited for me like the rain and opened their mouths for the spring rain. And how he was a respected and well-off man, and he's longing for all of that again. And then the longing gives way to lament. And he talks about his life now as we move into chapter 30. But now they laugh at me. Men who are younger than I. And in that culture, age counted for something, Don't count for much anymore, I'm learning. Not that I consider myself aged, but in this time of social physical distancing, I'm always surprised, why is it me that's moving out of the way for the 16-year-old on the sidewalk? This would not have happened in my grandmother's little town on the prairies. You got out of the way of the older people. You stood by and, you were respectful to them and that sort of thing. Or as this afternoon, we had the funeral for Alma Lucci, and we were driving to the cemetery. And I always keep a track of this as you're doing this. Exactly one car pulled over to the side. I mean, that used to be just like automatic. I remember that, my dad drilling that into my head. You come across a funeral procession, you pull to the side of the road and you show respect, and that doesn't happen. Well, Job knew all about that. He'd gone right from the top. They mock me now. Verse 10, he says they don't hesitate even to spit at the sight of me, which is, that's, even today, that's, we get the image, if you spit at somebody, that's low. You're kind of the ultimate disrespect in our culture. In other cultures, it's shaking your shoe at them or something like that, but, they're spitting at him. Now my life ebbs away. He's not dying in his own house here. He's dying in agony. My days of affliction have taken hold of me. Days of suffering greet me. And then sort of the ultimate put down. Verse 29, I've become the brother of jackals, the companion of owls, or other translations say ostriches. One can fly, one can't. The common denominator is that neither were clean birds, and they hung around out in the wilderness. We're kind of a little more in love with them today than people were back then. And jackals is this kind of probably a representation for the entire dog world. Dogs were not clean. Any kind of canine, whether it was the jackal, the dog, the hyena, anything like that, those were unclean. As one of our professors used to say in school, there is no such thing in the Bible as a good dog. Dogs, we remind our dogs of this all the time. When we have a little Sunday school at home for the dogs, we go, there is no such thing as a good dog. Not in the Bible anyway. And then a couple of them have proven that they're not good dogs in their own way. I had one, our first dog that we had after we were married, who lived with us for the first 17 years of our marriage. We actually got her we had totally convinced her that she was not a good dog. Because when I'd get her going and I'd ask her if she was a mean dog, and she'd bare her teeth and growl and carry on and just go completely berserk. And all I'd have to do, I would say the words, but all I actually had to do was go with my hand like this. She knew the hand. That's what I did with my hand, and she just started growling. It was kind of fun, sometimes to scare people, because she'd never actually bite anybody. She'd just growl away and carry on. And then you could say anything you wanted. One time we had a guest in the house, and I decided to make myself notorious. So I got the dog going, and she was going like this, and this girl was taking notice, and I said, I asked the dog, "Are you possessed by a demon?" Got a phone call from somebody a week later and said, I hear you have a demon-possessed dog. No, I don't have a demon-possessed dog. My dog's a heathen, but she's not demon-possessed. But anyway. All right. So getting back to Job again here. We started it tonight, those first two chapters. I mean, he's right on the heights, strong, this is all there. And then, you just sort of see him sinking down. And as he tells how bad things are. And then we come to chapter 31. His final words. And in chapter 31, there's a structure to this, and he goes back. The key thing that he's going to emphasize here is his innocence. This time he's going to use the language of covenant that he has made. Chapter 31 begins, I made a covenant with my eyes. How then could I gaze on a virgin? What would be my portion from God above, and my heritage from the Almighty on high? I've made a covenant, I'm going to live as God's person. And God sees that covenant in verses 4 to 6. God sees my ways. Does he not see my ways and number my steps? If I've walked with falsehood and my foot has hastened to deceit, let me be weighed in a balance. Let God know my integrity. And then for a whole section that we won't read all the way through, but this is where he really goes at this. He just lays out his innocence. He talks, for example, if I've turned aside from the way, if my heart's gone after my eyes, then let me sow and let another eat. If my heart's been enticed toward a woman, and then let my wife grind for somebody else. Take my wife from me. If I've rejected the cause of my manservant or my maidservant when they brought a complaint against me, did I do that? No. If I've withheld anything from the poor or desired that the poor desired, or have caused the eyes of the widow to fail, like not looked after somebody, or not shared my food. He just goes on for quite a length here, listing off things, some of which he's actually been accused of. If you remember way back in the beginning of our talking of the three friends, Eliphaz, the first to speak, by his third speech, he actually starts accusing Job of things. He's pulling stuff out of the air. Job almost is taking those things that he says and going, if I did any of this, then yeah, okay, I get it. I deserve to be punished for this. If this is what my life was, then let God have his way. But I haven't done any of that. And then by the time we get to verse 35, he's again appealing to God. First it's God sees my ways, and then he wants God to listen to him in verse 35. Oh, that I had one to hear. And here's my signature, he says. Let the Almighty answer me. Oh, that I had an indictment written by my adversary. I'd carry it on my shoulder. I'd bind it on myself as a crown. I'd give him account of all my steps. Like a prince, I'd approach him. And then he calls forth a witness to the covenant that he has, the land. If my land has cried out against me, then, let thorns grow instead of wheat and foul weeds instead of barley. If I've really been this bad, then okay. But I haven't. That's his argument all the way along. And then the lovely sentence that's at the bottom of, I think, page 3 on your sheet or whatever, 2, wherever we are here. Then the words of Job are ended. That's it. He's done. He sits down. And that's where we'll stop tonight too. We're at 8 o'clock, and the next little section is kind of small. There is one more guy who has to speak yet, and just to give you a little bit of a foretaste, we don't really know. We don't really know where to put this guy. A young guy stands up, and he's got to say something yet to Job. The three friends were all older guys, and this fourth fellow named Elihu has also been sitting there listening, and he can take it no more. And so if you want some fun over the next week, if you want to read the 5 chapters where he yatters on at some length, you can immerse yourself in the question that confounds us about this guy. Is he really wise? Or is he just, the word I used on the lesson sheet, a puffed up religious gas bag? I've always wanted to use that in a Bible class. Puffed up religious gas bag. I have my opinion, which I'll share with you next week. But if you want to read him and see, he's certainly got some good things to say. There's no doubt about that. But some have even gone so far as to suggest, and we'll talk about this more next time, that he might actually be inserted into the story as a bit of comic relief. That this has all been so intense and so heavy that we all just need a break here for a minute. And Elihu happens to be the guy who just kind of steps in and gives us all something, because nobody's happy with him by the end. And he gets everybody riled up. And partly it's because he's young. And you know how young people can be sometimes, right? They know everything, right? Yeah. Let's look and see if we have any questions here from the floor or from the... Christine, okay, comment here. Job is arguing that life isn't fair, isn't he? Yes, absolutely, yes. Job is arguing life is not fair. Yes. Yeah, life ain't fair. Yeah, that's absolutely. He doesn't, if he'd have been a bad guy and done terrible things, then let all this happen to me. I didn't do it. So, right on. Okay, we'll handle Elihu quickly at the beginning of the next session, and then we'll move to God himself and what God has to say. To use Hebrew, we'll go from Elihu to Elohim. That's one of the Hebrew words for God. Let's close with a prayer. Gracious Lord, Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time we've had together this evening and for guiding us along in the study of Job. We thank you for revealing to us what was sometimes hidden to people in generations past, your wisdom, the wisdom that comes ultimately from Christ, who takes our sin and our suffering and is really the perfect Job and dies for us in our place. We pray now that as we come to the end of this day, we would have restful sleep tonight, and that you would use us graciously and wisely to do your work as we serve you for Jesus' sake. Amen. All right, everybody. We will pick it up there next time. And like I say, if you want to read something and come to your own opinion on the fool or the wise man, whatever this young guy is, have fun. Sue, yes?
Where do I find what I'm supposed to be reading? I missed.
Where are you supposed to read? It's on the sheet. Yeah, it's the last page of the sheet. Sorry, that's a good question. Yes, the Elihu section is referred to on the 4th page, chapters 32 to 37. Yep. All right. Have a good evening, everybody.